Welcome everybody, this is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group. So the community call which we are having bi-weekly, and in this call we talk about all of the non-client-side development stuff. So we have a separate call for SharePoint Framework and JavaScript development, and in this one we concentrate more on the other stuff of the game. So meaning CSOM, provisioning, flow, PowerApps, and all of this stuff which is related on SharePoint development as well. Now, today we kind of start with a classic recap of the 3 open source projects which we are running, or open source areas which we are running in this non-SPFX side of the game, and then we'll have 3 cool demos coming up. So Chris will start, and then I shuffled the order slightly, so don't worry about it. Chris will start as always as a list formatting tips demo, then we move to Chaks, and then we move to Markus Möller. So Markus has a really cool provisioning solution lined up as well. And if we have time for the Q&A. Quick reminder on the Microsoft Teams. Yes, there's no point having this discussion in chat window. We know we should be moving in. We're still waiting for the attendee/presenter capability in Teams, and we'll move in right after that's available. And the Teams broadcasting is not an option either right now, but just to recap that one. Just a reminder for everybody, if you're interested on participating on the community, you are more than welcome to ping us and volunteer for doing live demos or showing a technical pattern. We obviously want these to be more on samples and guidance, and sure, if you have a product or a pattern or a solution which you want to present from a pattern perspective, that's absolutely fine as well. But we don't want these demos to be, let's say, product demos, because that's not what this community is all about. You can absolutely contribute in GitHub. We have a lot of repositories available for you, and then you can provide feedback, and please provide feedback so we know if something isn't working for you, so we can fix that. 3 different assets, just a reminder: AKMS SP Dev Docs, the documentation guidance, AKMS SP Dev Videos, which is breaking actually 10,000 subscribers within next week, which is pretty cool. And then SP Dev Issues is our issue list for reporting anything related on dev topics. So if you're hitting an API or you have some other issues related on development, please let us know. A few kind of announcements before we go to the recurrent slides. So just a few reminders. Provisioning.sharepointpnp.com is in public preview. I wrote a updated blog post on this one yesterday in the SharePoint Dev blog, not the Dev blog, the SharePoint blog. So please test it out. This is an awesome tool for you to generate SharePoint lookbook kind of sites as a demo site or as a starting point site to any tenant in the world. So as long as you're a tenant administrator, and you can actually provision these templates to your tenant. Now, some of the templates have pre-requirements, like you have to have an app catalog in a tenant, or you have to have taxonomy administrative permissions. So please check the template descriptions so you can match the pre-requirements. But a lot of majority of the lookbook tenants are mainly there for you they don't actually have any pre-requirements other than you being a tenant administrator. But please give us feedback. It is now in public preview. We refreshed slightly the UI actually yesterday as well. There's also better exception handling in certain scenarios and more descriptive error messaging. We're looking into getting this one the more reliable, will improve the experience, will improve validation, and this actually tries a lot of the engine work, which we'll talk about in a few slides as well, so the provisioning engine work as well. Because we are looking into integrating this to Office 365 developer tenants automatically and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of things happening related on the provisioning. Now, the second thing what I wanted to kind of remind, if you missed this one, even though this is not the SharePoint Frameworks community call, so SharePoint Framework 1.8.1 is now available. This one is addressing a few regressions which we had in the 1.8 release. So, and we have an updated set of training materials available for SharePoint Framework. So if you are a generic SharePoint developer, the training material is a great way of learning how to do SharePoint Framework development as well, on top of the CSOM and provisioning and all of that, what you can do in here. Now, let's actually move into the PnP CSOM Core library and quick update from there. And Erwin, I think you're ready to do a quick update on this one.
Yeah, Yeah, so latest version has been out now for a while already. So what we're doing currently is working like crazy in getting the PnP provisioning engine up to levels of the schema. So the PnP provision schema has been published now, the latest version, but that's just a schema. Now we're doing the implementation. And there's all kinds of interesting new goodies coming in the provisioning engine. And our goal is to have that actually in a working state before the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas. Things that we will support, for instance, the provisioning of Teams. You will be able to set a kind of a lot of more properties on modern client-side or client-side pages or modern pages. Things like section backgrounds and all those kind of things, different headers, you can all set them. The provisioning engine now, actually already in the dev branch, if you use that one, it already supports setting the site header and the site footer. You can enable the mega menu, etc., etc., etc. It took us a while, but finally it is now possible in the provisioning engine to set author and editor fields on list items that you're creating or documents you're uploading. Finally, that support is there, so you can upload documents as being authored by a different user. That's more of the internal workings, because we're calling out to the graph for some things, specifically Teams. There's a bit of a challenge or the complexity there. It's like, okay, you connect it to a SharePoint site. How do we connect that to the graph and make it as seamless as possible? We have ways around that. From a code perspective, there's an entry point where you can provide your own access token. And then we will use that token throughout the calls from PowerShell. And that's maybe something, if you can flip to the next slide, because I'm sort of moving over automatically to PowerShell here, PnP PowerShell, because they are so connected. So in PowerShell, we're working now on a very seamless experience where you do not get an additional authentication prompt. You will just connect once to your site with username, password, and then we'll take it from there for you and connect to the graph with the correct scopes, etc., and do the work for you behind the scenes in the provisioning engine. So there's a lot of work going on there. I'm very excited about this new release. A lot of new really exciting functionality coming in there, and you'll notice that we're moving more to like tenant level, although we're not forgetting about the site level of provisioning, as I said already, documents and list items. And on site level, there's many small changes and updates and fixes and additional properties that pop up here and there. So if you haven't looked at the schema already for the provisioning engine, the latest schema, I would absolutely, that's the 1903 schema. I would absolutely advise you to check it out if you're interested in what is coming. A little marker, what we do is we build our code and we merge it into the dev branch. So if you have the current dev branch and use that as your code base, you will see things pop up. It's not necessarily a given that it will work if you compile it. It will probably compile, that's when we make sure it will compile, but there will be bugs because it's a dev branch. Keep that in mind. So when we release it, then the bugs should be gone as much as possible. That's it for me.
Okay, so and just to recap a few things what Erwin said. So really big thing here is that the templating, the model is now going to reach outside of the SharePoint. So and what it means in practice, I'm just trying to oversimplify things, is that you're able to create a definition of a tenant. So you're able to say, hey, here's my definition of a tenant. We will have 5 site collections, these teams, and these channels, and these tabs pointing to these Microsoft SharePoint sites. And in these sites, we'll have these kind of web parts and modern experiences and all of that. And then you're able to just stamp those definitions to any tenant. So that's what it means in practice. So really cool stuff. So team support, Azure AD user support, looking into email inboxes support, and all of that stuff. So
right. Yeah, you briefly mentioned the Azure AD, but we will allow you to actually provision users to the Azure AD and even assign SKUs to them. So you say, okay, this user has that license and that license and that license, that kind of stuff. That will come too.
Yeah. So really cool stuff extended above SharePoint. Now, quickly on the modernization tooling, Bert Jansen is not joining on this call, hopefully, unless he's anonymized his name. He's on vacation and hopefully having a summer family vacation. Quick update in here. The big thing here is that Bert recorded a set of webcasts. So if you're looking into doing SharePoint page transformation, basically transforming classic classic SharePoint experiences to the modern experiences. There's now a series of webcasts and videos which are explaining how this tooling can be set up, how does it work, how do you configure that, and what does it actually contain and all of that. So that will be probably highly beneficial for you if you're looking at making this happen. Obviously, we want people to move to the modern, and all of this tooling is helping them people to make a transition from the classic experiences to the modern. So really, really cool. And like mentioned on the IAM window, David, thank you. So public space support is now in preview. There's more updates coming up on all of this stuff later. What we basically want to do more and more in the future is help you to adapt the modern experiences, because that's where the investments are. That's what we're building together with Teams people and integrating to Teams and all of that greatness. So making this transition from the classic SharePoint as easy as possible is one of the key objectives what we have in engineering and also in the community side. So please keep on giving us feedback on that. Now, I think that's it for the quick updates. In less than 15 minutes, yes, we're making better progress on this, so we get to the demos. So we have 3 demos coming up today. Let's let Chris start, and then we move to Chaks related. Chris will talk about list formatting and custom row actions. Chaks will talk about uploading files to SharePoint from PowerApps using Microsoft Flow, super cool stuff. And then Markus will talk about using Azure automation for automatic provisioning of your SharePoint and Microsoft Teams structures. So super cool stuff and really great demos coming up. But let's jump on Chris's desktop. We are live from where?
Indiana.
Indiana. Woo! There we go.
A little more excited states. All right. So here we go. All right, that's me. Got it all? All right.
Yep.
Let's go. Let's jump in. So we're going to talk about custom row actions today. So we talked a little bit about these in the past couple of times, specifically around launching flows. But we've actually gotten a lot of questions about these. There's a little bit of confusion on how to put these in, what they do, why would you use them, and how you do it, and all that stuff. So we're going to cover that. So the way these work is right now, if I have a list with no formats, right, if I click on something, I get these buttons up here. I get like an edit and a share and all these nice little buttons. I can also, of course, click on the title, and it opens up the panel over here. You can also double-click anywhere in the item, and it does the same thing, right? And that's okay, but just like we've done before where we wanted to take away the need to come in here and do flow and all that stuff when you select, if you want to be able to bring those buttons down here, or bring some of those actions directly into your list items, there's support for that. So if we come in here and we're going to column settings, we're going to format this column, and we're going to do something like, we'll type in elem type, and we'll make this a button. So this is very important. Customer actions can only be applied to a button. You can put them anywhere, but they will not do anything. So if I say custom row action, and here this is a guy like this, so we got to put in an action inside. So we say action. In this case, we're just going to do that default click. So we're going to imitate what the title button is doing, right? And of course, we should add some text content. Sounds good. That's always a helpful thing to do, put a comma. Now if we preview that, right, we get this beautiful button here. Now I'm going to save that because we get a little bit of weirdness sometimes. Refresh that. Now when I hit this, wow! It does the exact same thing that I could do with the title. Very exciting. So that's not exactly the most exciting one, but let's take a look. We can go a little further with that, right? So maybe you don't want a big gray button on your screen here, which makes total sense to me. So we've got a series of samples now. So if we come over here to our list formatting repo, right, and we come down here to column samples, you'll see there's this brand new one called generic row actions. And in here, there is a format for each one of these different types of actions. So you can use these, and these are just fairly simple versions of this to kind of demonstrate that. We're going to apply these. Take a look at them in action. So you're just going to cut and paste those, preview that. So now it's the exact same thing, but you'll notice it doesn't look like a button anymore, because what we've done in here is we've added children and some styles. So some of the styles, we made that weird gradient from 1998. We made that transparent, right? We added a child here where we're just adding a nice icon called Open Pane. All right, and we can do that for all of these. So it's pretty straightforward. Well, it only works when I save it. So we'll save that one. All right, we'll come over here to Edit Action. I'm going to do the exact same things. You guys can see some of these here. Now, one thing with the Edit Action, right, we paste that. You'll notice up here that the action I'm using is Edit Props. Now, if you're using something like Visual Studio Code, you'll see that when you use edit props, see that right there? It actually says, that's not right. You failed. Right? Because it's saying it should be edit item props. That is a bug in the schema. So ignore that. It is edit props. Okay. Now the reason it's called edit props and not just edit is because it's like the same thing for document libraries, right? When you go and you edit the properties there. So when we hit edit properties, we save that. Again, symbol icon type thing here. Let's go over here. Let's format this one. Let's go to share, and then we'll demonstrate all of these. So this one has a custom action of share. Very exciting. Come over here, and we're going to go to delete action. I'm going to format that column. I'm going to grab this one. Again, I'm getting all of these from the repo, so I'm going a little fast on purpose. So if we come in here, we can see action is delete. So let's close these for now. All right, so now we get this edit action, which again opens it all the way in edit mode. This is going to work nicely if you've already customized your list form with PowerApps. All of that's going to work exactly the same, so you don't have to do anything different. The share is going to open up this nice little thing, so I can send my link to my hello item or whatever I've got here. All right, and delete is going to prompt them to delete it. All right, so obviously you can't just straight up delete it, but you can prompt them for them to delete it. Now, so this isn't super helpful, right, necessarily to put these here since they're already up here. It does prevent us from having to come up here, select an item, then choose edit. So there is some helpfulness there. It's even more helpful in a view format, however. So you can come over here to something like this. Right, you can see this is a view format. We've actually wrapped the entire thing in a button. So if I take a look at that, format the current view, you can actually see the entire row formatter is wrapped in a button. Don't necessarily see that, but by doing that, the entire item is now able to open it up. So you can do that as well. We've got some other formats to show individual buttons kind of linked in there. You can do some conditional showing on those. What you can't do is the condition for the action. And of course, we've seen this one before, right, where we format the flow. So let me grab my execute flow. So this one's slightly different, which we've seen. And that when we do this one, we'd only have to provide not only the action of execute flow, we have to provide the ID of the flow associated with this list. Again, we've covered this a number of times. There's some samples, some guidance on that, so I'm not going to go into real details on that. But one of the things I wanted to point out that's pretty cool, let me refresh just to make sure I got everything here, is when I do something like the butter is turned, I do my flow action. This flow has already been associated with this list, and it's for selected items, right? So you come up here, and I say run flow. Now watch what happens here. This is pretty cool. We'll see. Watch this butter is turned. Is it going to? Oh, look at that! So we had a live list update, right? So the butter is turned suddenly got an exclamation mark. A very useful flow, right? So that's what we can do with that emphasized flow. But that's really interesting, the idea that I didn't have to refresh this. So let's take a look at this in a little more detail. So this is cool, but what if for the horses, we just saw this presentation, right? We come over here to our standard Warrior Horses site, and we want to see this in action maybe in a little more elaborate way, maybe less useful, but more elaborate. So we come into the secret lab, where experiments are run upon these horses. All right, so we'll zoom that back out. So we've got ourselves a nice view format here. Right. The thing is, we can take advantage of. So we've got, an elaborate view format. Let's refresh, make sure I got it, so we don't lose all my connections. All right, good enough. I zoomed out too much. Reset the zoom. Perfect. Okay. So I've got my experiment here going on. I've got these nice buttons over here that I can style any way I want. Right. I can put images inside here. I can make these just buttons. I can put all sorts of elements, icons, everything else. Right. A report's just going to open up the list item pane. Alter's going to do the same kind of edit. Right, killing the experiment, not the horse itself. Right, we'll delete it, and notify, of course, is going to provide us that share link. But here's something else we can do. Right, so when we take advantage of, say, starting a flow here, we can begin the experiment. When we run that, you notice one of the cool things here is that we had those live list updates before. You'll see that your format actually can respect those live list updates themselves. Right, so as you execute things in the background, you can keep your list view up as almost a dashboard of things. Right, so this is a little bit of a strange experiment in some of this, but you get the idea that this quickly becomes really powerful. So as other people are editing things behind the scenes, right, or you've got flows, long-running flows, or updating things, or other things are triggering, you can keep something like this up all the time and keep that going. Right, and you can even associate different flows, right? So I've got a halt experiment. So you get the idea that this suddenly becomes really, really powerful, and you can do so much more by integrating some of these things with either Flow or with these live list view updates within your view and column format. So, woo! Awesome stuff. All right, let's review real quick. So, custom row action only works in a button element, but use those style and children properties, get all fancy in there. All right, there is some weirdness with the data redraws. You saw that I was refreshing. So if you apply this in your format and you've just done the preview and it doesn't seem to work, hit the save button, refresh, and it should work. There's also some interesting stuff going on when a list item gets updated. There's an open issue for that. And again, you only need that action params if you're doing the execute flow. And this is an important one. This is one of the only items in all of this formatting where you cannot use an expression, and that's in the action property. So if you need to have a different action for your button, you're actually going to need to use our display none trick and have two different elements for that. So here's those actions again. You got default click, you got edit props, you got share, delete, and execute flow. Very exciting. Again, ignore the schema. It's a lie. The schema's a lie. All right. Last thing here, those live list updates are magical. So take advantage of those. The only real sadness right now is not, and I'm hoping yet, work in the list and library web parts. So it's only something that's live within the list view itself. So, but take advantage of that. I think it's really, really powerful. All right. And last but not least, here is where you can find those samples. If you want to take a look at some of that code, you can go over here and see our row actions. We've also got a little more details on those start flows. And then if you want to see where we've integrated inside a larger view, you can see in the contact card format, or where we've wrapped the entire view in an action, you can see it in the bulletin board format. All right, that's it for this week's exciting list formatting tips. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Chris. Really, really, really great stuff. It has to be something in the air or water in Indiana related on the demo content, like mentioned in iWindow. But yeah, really cool stuff, and these are great samples. And like I said, the GitHub repo has all of the samples available for anybody. And I know that Chris has done a good job on clarifying if there's a list dependency, it is defining what kind of list has to exist and what are the columns and all of that for the list. But I think that's it from this one. So let's actually move Chaks to your screen for a next demo related on Flow and PowerApps.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yep, I got it. So that typically means that other people in the world got it as well. Yep, there's a confirmation. So thank you, Chaks. Just take it away.
Excellent. So today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that many MVPs have tried and are still trying to get this working. And yes, the product team is also working with PowerApps to make this scenario even more better. The ability to upload files to a library, whether that be images or documents, doesn't really matter, right? A file is a file, through a PowerApp app. Now, this could also be in custom form if you want to, but basically through PowerApps. Now, there is no native support, so we need the help of the awesome Flow to basically help us get the image from the PowerApp and then put it into a SharePoint library. So there is some hack and trickery involved here. This, like a few months back, this was really a cumbersome thing. The only way, the only person in this planet that was able to do this, and I'm not joking, is John Liu, the MVP for Office and whatnot. Like, he is really, really good in Microsoft Flow, and he's kind of the hardcore developer that has chosen Microsoft Flow as his language. We all choose C# and JavaScript and tend to be happy with it. John chose Flow to do all of his things that he builds in his time. So he showed us an Azure function, a way to build an Azure function. Take the image that you pick in PowerApps and then convert that to bytes through an Azure function, get that bytes back and start a flow and then push it. Wow, that's like really, really hard. And I do follow his blog, and on April 9th, he actually blogged about how to upload image from PowerApps to Flow using an unused Outlook connector. So that kind of like intrigued me, and I went through his blog post and I saw all the things what he was doing, and finally that led to what the problem was. So now we are actually in the product team discussing around, hey, why is this different? Where is it this problem and things like that. So kudos to John and several other MVPs that have been helping us understand what is going on and take through that. But the good news, we're unblocked. I wanted a solution, something that you can use Flow and not Azure Functions, because that's something you need to write code. So let's look at the demo, what I'm doing here. So here I have a simple PowerApp app. I have a picture control that you add in the PowerApps and a button upload to SharePoint. And here's all of my images from my library. So now what I can do is I can select a picture from my computer, and then that's going to basically show me a preview. And then I'm going to basically now upload to SharePoint. That's going to do its magic. I've noticed that since my images are really big, like maybe 15 MB or something, it's taking a little bit time. But you can see that there's a progress bar on the top that's actually showing, and the button is disabled, meaning that it's doing something with the flow. So hopefully this will get done in a few seconds. Is everyone still with me? Can you see the screen? Can you hear me properly? No scat-nados?
Yep, all good, all good. You're not presenting by yourself. That's always a good sign.
Excellent, yeah. Excellent, so it worked, and you can see this got refreshed. And here's our uploaded image, flowers. So that's the demo, and that's how it works. So what I'm doing behind the scenes, let's look at what is happening in the Power App first before we go to the flow. Opening the Power App here, getting things ready. I'm glad we don't have working on it anymore, and we have getting things ready.
That's, by the way, a clever thing. So.
Yep. Don't go away. I'm getting things ready. Don't go away. So the button is all the magic where it happens, right? So if you look at what I'm doing in my button, by the way, here's a cool trick. This is how usually you type, right? So you come and type expressions here. And this is okay, but for developers who have a background in writing C# and JavaScript code, you really want a really good formatting in a way that it is similar to how you write code. You can do this format text, and wow, it actually now formatted everything like a code. So it's pretty cool and easy to read for me, rather than being in this state to continue like a line. So really cool tip if you're using PowerApps and writing expressions. So what I'm doing here when I click the upload button is I'm going to set something, a variable file path, and then I'm getting the value from a flow. So this is calling a flow, PowerApps file upload to sp.1, and then it's sending the uploaded image that you picked from the control and the name of the file that you picked from the control. And that's it. And that's going to execute. That's going to set something in the file path. And I'm just checking. If the file path is not blank, then refresh the data source. Here is the demo data source. And I use the semicolon to continue that statement for the condition being true. Is reset the add media button, which is the picture control, to true. So this is what happens. Really, really simple thing to call. Now let's go look at flow. And here is the PowerApps file upload to SharePoint. So this is basically a flow with a trigger, PowerApps trigger. And then that's how you can relate to the Power App. One of the things we found out, that the problem, the reason why we're not able to use create file directly with the Power Apps is that one of the things you do to get input from the Power Apps in your flow is you just go to the property in any action, and then if you want this to be something that you take a dynamic content from PowerApps. All you do is you click the C more, which is the PowerApps trigger, and you can say ask in PowerApps. So I'm going to do this now. So it's going to say ask in PowerApps, and it's going to create file underscore file content. And this is going to be the type of this file content property, right? Similarly, I did the same with the Outlook connector, send an email for the attachments content. So it generated the send email attached content. Now, if you go look at this PowerApps trigger and peek code, you can see what is the type and what it is getting returned. So you can see attachments content is byte format in a string, right? It's a format of byte with string type. So you're going to get a bunch of strings with bytes. And then the file content, which I just added, it shows binary. And this is the biggest difference why it works for Outlook and why it does not work for SharePoint. So we are requesting binary, but we're not getting the right things back from PowerApps. So we're working to see what is what is going on. And even for byte, I get a large string array. I actually don't get a byte. I have to get an array of bytes, right? So if I want to really build that image. So we are working to understand what is going on, but right now this is a workaround. So you add an Outlook connector, you go to that Outlook connector, and you say ask in PowerApps. That will put the right parameter, the right format, and then you basically use that parameter as the input to the file content property for the create file. And you make a condition such a way that your flow will never go to this Outlook send an email condition, right? 1 is equal to 2. It's never going to be. Or in the world of horses, it could be. So be careful when you're there. Otherwise, in this normal world, 1 is never going to be equal to 2. So you're not never going to go to this, condition. It'll always come back here. And that's how this whole magic works. So if you go look at our runs that we just did, you can see that now here I got my schema and output is just, click to download, and it's going to give you what flows got from PowerApps and what they store. And you can see here is the string representation of that image. So somehow, if you make the format as byte, it works. If you make the format as binary, which is what SharePoint Action asks for PowerApps to send, this doesn't work. So it's a simple workaround. Yes, you need to know about this a little bit, and it's not native yet, but it's a really, really simple workaround than calling an Azure function and basically trying to do some, connecting from Flow to Azure and getting all the data back. So John Liu blogged about this in detail. So I'm going to paste that in the chat window here. So you can follow the steps from the blog post and basically build your own PowerApps that can upload files to SharePoint using a flow, which is pretty cool actually now. Yeah, and that's the demo.
Awesome, thank you, Chaks. Really, really cool stuff, and really, really useful having those resources and the demo available. Let's go to Markus, and while Markus is starting with sharing, just a note as well. So John Liu is just this humongous amount of awesome stuff on his blog post related on flow and automation. So really, really great resource. Could maybe one thing, Chaks, do you know, is there a file size limit for the stuff when you're uploading for the files?
I don't know about that. That's something I'm still exploring.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a limit both on like how much big a file could be in the PowerApps, and then there's a limit on how big a file you could upload to the SharePoint. So right now this is using, I would say, yeah, I don't know the exact.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay. Thanks, Chaks. Now, Markus, we can see your slide, so everything should be fine. I can hear you. That's already a good sign. So we don't have to do this as a pantomime presentation. That would be fun. But I think it's time. We should have a sufficient amount of time for you to do the demo as well. Let's see if we have time for Q&A in the end. But take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, hello. Yeah, just give me a short, decent, quick introduction because it's the first time for me to present here in this kind of call. So my name is Markus Möller. I'm from Germany. I work there for Avanade. I have a Twitter account as well, for sure, and a personal blog where I write about things, for instance, about the topic also that I'm talking about right now. And this is about provisioning with Azure Automation. So, I think Azure Automation is quite an old service from Azure, but it's not that popular in use, I think, around SharePoint site provisioning as well as Teams provisioning. I haven't read so much about it, but I'm using it for quite a while now in customer scenarios and so on. So just give me some quick basics why you should also think about using it. So the setup I will show you in a minute is quite simple, and I think a bit simpler than other comparing technologies. For instance, when you have to set up an Azure function or the Azure web app also, takes a bit longer, I guess. PnP PowerShell, I think, is one of the best tools to work with SharePoint, especially with SharePoint provisioning. You have to need less lines of code for achieving results here. The thing is, in the demo, I will show you that you can use the same code base, meaning Azure runbooks, for administrative reasons as well as to connect them to your provisioning engine. This can be a lightweight approach with really less lines of code. I'll show you in the demo, but you can also, of course, scale this up to high-end solutions. And unfortunately, for user requests or something like that, of course, you would need a specific UI and connect this to your runbooks. Yeah, this is not my topic today, but I show you only the administrative setup. So the first thing what we need is we need an automation account in Azure. We have some ones here, and for today we will use that one. In that kind of an automation account, we have of course, our runbooks. We'll come there to a minute. And we also have some configuration assets, for instance, like the PowerShell modules, where you explicitly, for instance, have to upload your SharePoint PnP PowerShell module, which is not out of the box available. You can have your credentials here. You have some variables. Also have certificates. I use this right now for the modern authentication way. We show in the code in a minute. And that's all. So now come to our runbooks. The runbooks indeed are here in my case nothing else than PowerShell scripts. We have one parent runbook here, which I show you next, and we have some child runbooks which we will call one by one. So first we will use the create team 2 today, because these are optional ones. In my blog you can see the difference here, but I tell you in a minute. So we will first create a team in this case. We will then go to provision stuff with the provisioning templates, and finally we do some further steps which we cannot achieve with provisioning templates right now. This is roughly the pattern I often use to provision that. So the first thing is our parent runbook. We, of course, need some parameters here, such as the desired alias, a display name, a description, or an owner. We get some, here we can, for instance, get our credentials from the asset store. So when we quickly, for instance, would remove this, we can also get this from here directly and add this to the canvas once again. Getting some, I use this, it's a bit old school maybe, but I use an XML parameter for an XML string for several parameters in one variable. And then here we go and we'll call our first sub runbook and execute this. Once we have this, we will retrieve our team, which we got, and then next with this one, we will check if our site is ready. Yeah, this is a typical pattern also in a while string that we checked for several times if everything is ready so far during provisioning, because the speed of Office 365, of course, you know, might differ from day to day. And so this is a cool pattern. We will check this for several times now since the site is ready. And then we can go on with our second runbook and finally our third one. We can test this now. I'll show you in a minute the rest of the time, but we can already kick this off. I did this in preparation. We will just change some parameters here. So we have our team and desired alias, we have our display name, our description, and also an owner. And kick this off. And now it will run. Still in the queue, but shouldn't take long. Now it's already running. You don't have a live output here. This was in the past, it was working like that, but since a while it's not available anymore. But in case you need it in this test pane, you can still use refresh job screen. And here we see that we are already on the way. So what we can see right now, we already connected to our tenant. We created a new team with the desired display name and alias. Yeah, the team got created so far, but it's not ready yet because under the hood still things are going on. Okay, this takes some time. In the meantime, we can check the runbook, which is currently on its way. And this is the creation of team. And here we see already what we saw in the output, that we connected first against the Microsoft Graph with an app ID, app secret, and our tenant, which we got from the variable store. Then we create our header. And what we do in this case, and this is my create team runbook 2, this is the currently productive approach to create teams. We first will create a group with our, or we first will check if the alias is available, and then we are going to create a group. Here we build our request for that. And then finally we kick that off. And from that group, we afterwards create a team request to enhance this group to a team. This is quite that scenario which you might have already seen, for instance, in a video Paolo Pialozzi was showing a couple of weeks ago. I increased this only with desired alias and also adding owners, because I think creating groups without owners is not the best practice. So this was the first runbook. We can check, by the way, back to our test scenario, which already is gone through. So let's jump up here. So we saw that our team did not get ready so far, but with one retry, it got ready. And then here already our provisioning runbook starts. This maybe we first have a look into the code here. The first thing we will do, we defined a function here to download the PnP template. Because the PnP template, you know, when you run your PowerShell, usually you use from your file system. In that case, running in an Azure automation account, we will download this from Azure Blob Storage. Yeah, so I can show you in a minute where you find it. For the Blob Storage, we need our credentials. And also for connecting to SharePoint, this is our credentials we created. This is a bit more complex here, but I love to work with the modern authentication. Finally, I will tell you why. This all stuff you could also replace here. What I'm doing here in these lines of code with just a simple get credential. But modern authentication with an app registration is much better. Here we connect then against SharePoint. And then here we have our template, which we download. We saw the function above. And finally, we only apply this against the site. So how does it look like in an Azure storage? Here's our template From there it's downloaded. The final thing is doing some further steps. I can quickly go through that, which is currently not possible with PnP provisioning. We just decided to create another team tab. And therefore, in the final runbook, once again, to make sure we have it, we connect against Microsoft Graph. We create another REST request header. We create a request URL, a tab request, where we finally, where's the URL here? We create a URL against a list, I'll show you in a minute, which we created with PnP provisioning with our template. Yeah. And the final result in our test is that everything went fine. Here we have the download of our XML template, which was done to the local running environment of the automation account. And then finally here the provisioning is done. This was the second runbook, and here already starts the third runbook, where we are adding the tab against our team. And then finally, when we switch against our team, we have team number 15 created. This is standard, but this employees list, which we show up here, was created by PnP provisioning inside the team site. And finally, show you the template that I used for that. So I'm creating here some fields, creating a content type, creating a list instance, and finally creating lots of data rows for a reference list first. And here are all our employees, which we just show. That was my little demo. Finally, some lessons learned from this thing. When I have to create a site, a team, whatever, I use the pattern that first I try to solve my requirements with a provisioning template. If this doesn't work, then I try to use PnP PowerShell before or after provisioning. Finally, you saw this in that case because does not work creating the tabs so far. I use REST methods, for instance, against Graph or SharePoint or whatever. You can also try to use theater methods inside PowerShell. And what you can finally do if nothing helps, I also did this in seldom cases, is writing your own PowerShell commandlets. We also made migrations with that approach. In that case, we do it a bit different. Don't handle one site in all steps, so meaning creation, provisioning, doing further steps. No, then we do to speed up a bit. We would first create maybe, for instance, the 100 sites, then go to all 100 sites and provision them, and then finally do the additional steps to all 100 sites afterwards. And yeah, finally, the thing is, when it comes to authentication, what I found out is when you work with the modern app authentication, you solve lots of problems on top, such as multilingual bugs because you don't have a user service account which might not fit the current language, and then you get issues with PnP provisioning. You also don't have to handle, even when you update sites, you can also use this for administrative tasks, you don't have to handle getting admin, site collection, admin access once again and remove it afterwards if you want to do this. No, you always have this access when you have the right app registration and so on. Yeah, that's from my side. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Markus. Really great demo, and actually that's a really great explanation how we are using those different pieces and bits and pieces on the UI. So thank you for clarifying. And the learnings are always good. Learnings are really good on the demos as well because they help other people understand what you've gone through, and then you're sharing your the learning, so they don't have to bang their head against the wall, so to say. So thank you for that. Cool. This is quite rare. This is how it should be. Actually, we have almost 10 minutes of Q&A time in the end of the call. So really nice pace related on the general announcements first, and then 3 demos, and we have 8 minutes time for if there's any ad hoc Q&A stuff for anybody in the call. Maybe one thing what I wanted to, while we're waiting for any questions, if anybody is interested, I actually recorded a new video earlier today related on the app pages in SharePoint Online. So if you're interested on having a look on how the SharePoint app pages can be done and how they actually are visible in the modern page layout picker, there's a video available in the SharePoint Dev YouTube channel around that one. So that one shows the modern page layout picker as an example, which is now currently being rolled out to targeted release tenants. But also then if you have any of the existing web parts, or if you create a new web part, how do you expose that as a single part app page, and what does it actually mean in practice? I don't want to steal the time away from Q&A, so I'm not going to do a live demo on that one today, at least. But any other questions? Thank you, Julia, on the always comments. If anybody is wondering, obviously the community calls all are getting recorded, and the demos are getting released as an individual videos as well in the SharePoint Dev YouTube channel. The recording of the full call will be out tomorrow, and then the individual videos during next week. That's the typical time frame. Officially tomorrow is a public holiday where I'm currently located, but I'll think I'll find time to push out the blog post and the video, so that should be fine. Is there any documentation on using the sequence property for SPFX extension? Sequence property. Sequence property is around the order, so that should actually work properly. Now, do we have it documented? That's a fair question. I'm not sure if we actually shown that, but basically there's a sequence attribute in a custom action, user custom action element. So if you have a look on the classic documentation of user custom action element, which we generate for you in the solution by default in the client components folder, if I remember the folder correctly, you can add a sequence attribute there and then say sequence 100 or 200 and 300 for this one, and then another one sequence 600 or whatever, and that will then line up the order of the user custom actions or the buttons in the right order. Are there any plans on splitting documentation between SharePoint Online and SharePoint 2019 given the widening gap of capabilities? That's a fair question from Paul related on the documentation challenge. This is a nasty resourcing challenge as well, because then managing two pieces of documentation is quite hard. But I think sooner or later we need to figure out how do we do this, because I think we're looking into having another on-premises version at some point, maybe, who knows, and then sooner or later there's going to be an even larger gap between the on-prem versions. So we need to be more explicit what's supported and where. So fair feedback on that one. So documentation is something the community may need to step on to help them. Yeah, looking for a good SharePoint framework web story that goes from no framework to React to something else, suggestions, a tutorial sorts of something getting started. So we do have, obviously, Eric, we have the tutorials in the documentation. We have also hands-on labs as a reusable SPFX training package from Andrew Connell. So there's a hands-on labs over there as well. But I'm not sure if we have a end-to-end longer story on how do we start from a no framework and then move to React and then to something else. To be fair, that's a quite rare case that would happen, because, and I would say most likely customers and partners, they settle on a specific framework. So in a certain partner, they decide that they will do Angular, a certain partner will decide that they will do React, and certain partner decides no framework at all. And then they have a standards on that, but no one step at a time guidance on that. Any timelines for open sourcing provisioning, was it provisioning service? So I can't actually, I don't have an exact timeline on that one. For the provisioning service, the provisioning engine itself, so all of the goodies which are actually making the automation to happen, that is actually open source already, and you can obviously use that using PnP PowerShell and all of that. So getting the provisioning service released as an open source solution, as a reference solution, is still pending on my table to proceed with our legal. That's basically what has to happen. So it is on my table. Not going to happen before Easter holidays, at least in Scandinavia. There's an Eastern holidays starting actually today, and we'll be back on Tuesday. But SharePoint, I will actually work on that one starting from next week. Good reminder. I'll just try to start again pushing on what is needed actually to make that happen. On webhook discussions, Markus is answering those on the flow and connectors. Good. Definitely transitioning. Yeah, fair point. Eric, understand the feedback. For flow, is there a way to script out setting sub request for approval? It's probably a discussion with Markus, because I'm not up to date on that question from Paul. Any guidance available on creating custom site provisioning template? You can actually extract, I think we have actually even videos, so you're able to extract the templates from the existing sites, and also on the provisioning templates. I think the easiest way actually to see this as practice is our open source templates, which are available in the GitHub as well. So all of the templates which are in the provisioning service are open source in this repository, which is available in there. Now, so feel free to have a look on them. There's an XML structures, there's an examples how to make those things happen, so that should be fine. .NET Core, anyone? Fair question, Ralph. So there is work being done on that one. As crossing fingers that we'll have great news on SPC. I can't promise that yet, and I don't want to steal any thunder away from possible announcements. So, but we are working on that one, so we absolutely understand that that needs to happen. Any new initiatives you need the community help with? There's always so much to do. SharePoint Starter Kit is one thing where we definitely need some assistance on making sure that everything is up to date. That's now actually in 1.8.0 phase, but no new actual open source projects as such right now, because we're trying to make the existing stuff, let's say, more mature. And Hugo related on that one actually, because that reminds me on the sample portal discussions, no news for that one either at this point, but that is progressing. There's an internal discussions going on that one. So if we would get a nice portal, external portal where people can expose their open source samples and all of that automatically, that would be a really great thing. But I think that's it for now. We're hitting the hour, so let's actually close up the call. Thank you everybody for joining, and thank you Markus, thank you Chaks, thank you Chris for the great demos as well. Super demos, and we'll get those out in the YouTube channel for next week as well. Happy Easter for those who are celebrating Easter this weekend or having a holidays, any extra days. Europe is having quite a few public holidays depending on the country this time of the year. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for feedback. Keep the feedback coming. Let's be active. Let's share. Sharing is caring. Thank you. Bye-bye.